Marcus Calloway was 41 years old, a man who had spent his adult life managing the infrastructure of large buildings, the systems behind the walls, the load-bearing decisions that nobody photographed and everyone depended on. He drove a 2017 Silverado with a dent in the rear panel he had never gotten around to fixing. He kept his coffee in a matte black thermos that had been a Christmas gift from his father 7 years earlier, 3 months before his father died. He came home on a Tuesday evening in February to find Denise sitting at the kitchen table with her coat still on and a folder in front of her that she hadn't opened, the way someone sits when they've been waiting for a specific set of footsteps. She had already decided before he walked in. He understood that within the first 11 seconds. What she hadn't decided, what neither of them had accounted for, in that kitchen, on that evening, was what he would do next. She had assumed she already knew. She had no idea how wrong that assumption was. Before we go any further, drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. The kitchen light was already on when Marcus stepped inside, the overhead fluorescent Denise had always preferred, and he had always found too harsh. Marcus Calloway had spent 19 years inside Meridian Regional Medical Center, first as a facilities coordinator fresh out of technical school, then as operations director, then, after his father died and the paperwork was read, and the attorneys finished explaining what his father had spent 31 years quietly building, as the majority owner of Calloway Medical Properties LLC, the holding company that owned the land, the building, and the operating license of Meridian Regional. His name was not on the front door. It had not been on the front door when his father ran it, and Marcus had seen no reason to change that. His badge said Director of Operations. His office was on the second floor, near the boiler room, because he had moved it there 11 years ago to be closer to the building's mechanical core. His truck was in the same lot as the custodial staff. On the days he came in early, which was most days, he made a full circuit of the building before sitting at a desk, every floor, every corridor, checking the systems the way his father had taught him to check a structure before committing weight to it. He had, at various points across 19 years, negotiated a replacement HESVAC contract that saved the hospital too. $3 million over 6 years, restructured the vendor relationships that had been bleeding the operating budget for a decade, and quietly prevented a mold situation in the West Wing from becoming a lawsuit. He had done all of this without a press release, without a recognition ceremony, without a line in the hospital newsletter. Denise had known who he was when they married, or she had known enough. What she had stopped being curious about, somewhere in year 4, was the rest of it. He had had no reason yet to wonder if that would matter. Then came that Tuesday in February. Everything that followed came from there. The folder on the table had a law firm's name embossed in the corner. Fairfield and Marsh. Denise had her hands flat on top of it, not holding it open, just keeping it still. She was wearing the dark gray blazer she wore when she needed to feel prepared. It had been a long time since Marcus had seen her wear it on an ordinary Tuesday. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," she said. "I want you to understand, this is not something I'm deciding today." Marcus looked at her. He set his thermos on the counter. "Okay," he said. "I need something different than what this is. I'm not saying that to be cruel." She opened the folder. She slid the first page across the table toward him. "My attorney has prepared an initial framework. He thinks we can get through this without it going to a long process." He didn't reach for the page. He didn't ask who the attorney was. He didn't ask the question he already knew she had a prepared answer for. He stood at the counter, and he looked at what she'd placed in front of him. The top of the page had a filing date. February 14th. She had filed on Valentine's Day, not out of cruelty, he thought. She had filed because her attorney had been ready and she had not wanted to wait another day. He picked up the page. He read it. Irreconcilable differences. Division of marital assets, including any jointly held property and associated equity interests. He looked up. Which equity interests? She didn't answer immediately. That pause, less than 2 seconds, was the first thing in the entire conversation he had not expected. My attorney says marital property is a broad category, she said. What you hold professionally may fall within it depending on how it was structured. He set the page down, face up. He did not raise his voice. He did not pick the page back up. He did not ask her how long she had known what he held professionally, or who had explained it to her in language precise enough to land in a legal document. He noted the phrase depending on how it was structured, and he filed it, not a conclusion, an observation. Marcus, she folded her hands on the table. I've been seeing someone. I want you to know that. I'm not trying to hide it from you. He looked at her. His name is Brennan. He works at the hospital. Marcus said nothing. This isn't about him, she said. This was already decided before him. I want you to understand that. He picked up his thermos from the counter. He walked to the sink. He rinsed it out with the careful attention of a man in no particular hurry. He dried it. He set it down. I'll need a few days to review this with my own counsel, he said. She had been expecting something else. He could see that in the slight adjustment of her posture. She had arrived with a second prepared response and had not needed it. He got his jacket from the hook near the door. He went to his truck. He sat in the driveway for 4 minutes with the engine running and the heat building. Then, he drove. He was already thinking about the phrase she had used, depending on how it was structured, the sound of something recently explained by someone who thought they understood what he had. He noted it. He drove. He would figure out the rest from there. 18 months before any of this, Marcus had co-signed a business loan for Denise's older sister, $42,000 toward a catering business, his credit history pulling the approval across the line when hers alone wouldn't have. The sister had stayed current on every payment. Marcus had not presented it as a favor. He had done it because it needed doing, and he was the one who could. Denise had said thank you once, that evening, and then the subject had been filed away in the way that things people assume are given tend to get filed. He had noticed her pulling away the previous spring. It was not a dramatic shift. It was a texture thing. The quality of attention she brought to an ordinary evening, the questions she had stopped asking, events she had started referencing as separate from him. Her plans and his plans treated as parallel calendars rather than one shared one. He had chosen to read it as stress. She had been finishing her nurse practitioner certification. He had given her the room she seemed to need. He had told himself that a man does not interrogate a marriage because a Tuesday evening feels different. He had said this to himself with the conviction of someone who believed fully in the structural integrity of what he had built. Raymond Church had worked beside him for 11 years as the hospital's chief of building systems, a compact man in his late 50s who said very little and noticed everything. One morning over coffee in the second-floor break room, Raymond had told him simply, "The people who keep this place running, Callaway, are the ones nobody ever takes a picture of." He had gone back to his mug. Marcus had gone back to his mechanical inspection reports. He had not held on to it at the time. He would. That was the part of him Denise had stopped finding it worth knowing about. Her name was Margaret Simmons. She was 67 years old, a former certified public accountant who had served as Callaway Medical Properties chief financial officer for 22 years before transitioning to a retained consulting role. She had been Marcus's father's most trusted set of eyes on the operating finances. She had been watching the situation develop for 3 months with the specific patience of someone who had spent a career reading what other people had not looked at closely enough. She had not said anything sooner. She had been waiting until he was in a position to hear it. She called him on a Thursday morning and asked him to come to her home office that afternoon. She said only, "Bring an afternoon, not an hour." She had the table prepared when he arrived, records organized in sequence, each item dated, each one flagged with a small adhesive tab. "I'm going to give this to you in order," she said. "I need you to let me get through all of it before you respond." She opened the first folder. The records began in late September, 7 weeks before Marcus had noticed any shift in the texture of Denise's evenings. A staff clearance request had been submitted through the hospital's internal HR channel and routed through the Physician Services Division for approval. The name on the request? Dr. Brennan Cole. The stated purpose: expanded access to operations scheduling and administrative records, citing a quality improvement initiative. Marcus looked at the date on the clearance request. He looked at who had approved it. He recognized the phrase Denise had used at the kitchen table, depending on how it was structured, and understood now whose vocabulary that was and where she had learned it. He said nothing. "There's more," Margaret said. She turned to the second folder. Inside was a memorandum, typed, dated January 9th, 6 weeks before the February 14th filing, submitted to the hospital's administrative board coordinator by Dr. Brennan Cole. It recommended, in formal language, that the Director of Operations position be reviewed for restructuring. It cited the need to modernize the organizational hierarchy and align operational leadership with current healthcare industry standards. It proposed that the Director of Operations role be absorbed into a new executive structure overseen by a newly created hospital president position, to be appointed by the board. The third paragraph named a candidate for that position. Marcus read the third paragraph twice. He set the document face down on the table. "He submitted this," Margaret said carefully, "believing the Director of Operations was an employee. How long have you had this?" "Since the 11th. I was trying to determine whether there was more before I came to you." "Is there more?" "There is." While Marcus had been managing a 3-week supply chain dispute in the hospital's biomedical procurement division, a matter that had occupied 40 hours of his attention across 12 working days, a request had been submitted through the facility's finance system for a formal appraisal of the hospital's owned property. The request had originated from a personal email address, not a hospital server. It had been routed to an external surveying firm with no existing contract with Callaway Medical Properties. It had been filed using Denise's staff login credentials on a Saturday morning when Marcus had been in the building for a generator maintenance window. The appraisal had been returned, in a formal PDF, to that same personal email address. The figure in the appraisal: 14. $2 million for the primary campus property. Margaret placed the appraisal document on the table. She placed the submission log beside it. She placed the email thread, recovered through a facilities audit she had quietly commissioned 14 days ago, beside both. Marcus stood at the end of the table and looked at the full spread. He approached it the way he approached a project that had gone wrong somewhere in the planning phase, not examining any single document first, but reading the structural logic of the whole. Where each decision had originated, where it connected to the next, who had benefited from what information, and when, and what they had intended to build with it. He could see every connection, every line, how one decision fed into the next, and who had been standing to gain at each point along the way. He could see exactly what had been under construction and how long it had taken to build. He didn't act immediately. Philip Arroyo had been his attorney since his father's estate cleared probate, a methodical man who called Marcus at 6:22 on the morning after Margaret's presentation. He had already worked through 2 of the documents she had shared with him the evening before. "Don't do anything yet," Philip said. "What you have is the beginning. I want to make sure you have the full structure before you move." A forensic accountant named David Park was retained by the end of that week. He had spent his career reading the patterns inside financial records that looked clean to everyone but him. He worked through the operations finance system's audit trail over 8 days. What he produced was a 14-page report documenting the full record of what the facility's finance request had set in motion. A title search, commissioned without authorization, on a property held under Callaway Medical Properties LLC, initiated using staff credentials and routed through a firm with no prior hospital relationship, with one clear purpose: to establish a property valuation before a divorce filing went in. The report identified 2 additional records Marcus had not known about. An email inquiry submitted to a commercial real estate attorney in early January, asking about the legal exposure of a holding company when its primary asset was the subject of a divorce proceeding, and a document downloaded from the state's business registration database on January 3rd, the full ownership structure of Callaway Medical Properties, retrieved from a public records search. Someone had known exactly what to look for. Someone had explained to them precisely where to find it. Dr. Brennan Cole called on a Monday afternoon. Marcus did not answer. The voicemail arrived in 6 composed sentences. Cole identified himself, expressed a general interest in connecting, mentioned they might have overlapping perspectives on the hospital's organizational future. The delivery had the smooth quality of something rehearsed that morning. He called again on Wednesday. The second message had a different quality inside it, something tighter around the edges of the reasonableness, a sharpness appearing through. He mentioned there were formal proceedings underway. He mentioned a sensible resolution might benefit everyone involved. He mentioned that he had already spoken with a colleague on the administrative board. Marcus listened to both messages once. He noted the shift from the first call to the second, the prepared composure giving way to something with edges. He noted the word colleague. He filed both observations and did not return either call. He did not move quickly. That was the element Cole had never managed to account for. He had spent months building an understanding of Marcus through Denise's description of him. Steady, patient, unlikely to push back, and he had made the most significant assessment error available to him. He had read patience as the outer limit of Marcus's capability. It was not the limit. It was the method. Marcus called Denise on a Friday afternoon. His tone was level, specific. He said he believed they could resolve the asset questions without prolonged litigation and suggested she have her attorney arrange a formal settlement meeting. She agreed before he had finished the sentence. He heard the held breath beneath the relief in her voice. He ended the call. Philip Arroyo was watching him from the other side of the table. "She thinks the meeting is a concession," Marcus said. Philip said nothing. He refilled his coffee. He kept his eyes on the documents. Marcus reached the building 27 minutes before anyone was expected. He preferred it that way. The conference suite on the 4th floor of Meridian's administrative wing held a long table, 6 chairs to a side, and a wall of windows that looked out over the east parking structure. The morning light came in flat and white. The room had the particular stillness of a space where people have agreed to be direct with each other, and the thermostat had been set cold enough to ensure no one settled in. Philip Arroyo arrived at 7:43, followed by David Park, who carried 2 organized case folders and set them on the left side of the table without speaking. There was no visible urgency in either of them. They had done the work. There was nothing left to be nervous about. Denise and Dr. Brennan Cole arrived together at 8. Cole was 44, pressed shirt beneath a sport coat, the particular bearing of a man who had been told enough times that he was impressive to have started believing the room confirmed it. He made brief eye contact with Marcus on entry, a professional acknowledgement, cordial, measured, and then redirected his attention to Philip Arroyo, as if Marcus were simply one party among several that the proceedings would need to manage. Denise's attorney entered after them. He looked at the document folders arranged on Marcus's side of the table and paused for a half-second before sitting. Philip opened without preamble. Before any discussion of terms, there are documents that need to be acknowledged by all parties present. He placed the first item on the table with the unhurried precision of a man who had done this before and required no audience for it. He named it, the facility's finance system log showing an unauthorized property appraisal request, submitted January 17th using staff credentials during a scheduled maintenance window. The appraisal was returned to a personal email address, Philip said. The subject property, Callaway Medical Properties primary campus. The figure in the appraisal was $2 million. He let the number rest in the air for a moment before continuing. This transaction was not authorized. A civil petition has already been filed in connection with it. Denise's attorney began writing. David Park placed the second document on the table. Philip walked through it without editorial, the State Business Registry download, dated January 3rd. The full ownership record of Callaway Medical Properties, LLC. Retrieved from a public records database, documented in the correspondence trail. Then, the third item. The memorandum submitted to the Administrative Board Coordinator on January 9th, recommending the restructuring of the Director of Operations position and naming a candidate for the proposed replacement role. Dr. Brennan Cole's name in the signature line. Cole's expression had not moved, but the effort required to keep it unchanged was visible to anyone paying close enough attention. The certainty he had walked in carrying, the certainty that he understood the room he'd entered, had somewhere in the last 14 minutes shifted into something he was now working to maintain. Marcus was paying close attention. "I want to be precise," Philip said, addressing the full table, "about what we are presenting today and what we are not. We are not making representations about criminal exposure in this meeting. What we are doing is ensuring that these records are present, formally, in front of all parties, and that they are part of the proceeding going forward. All parties' counsel will want time to review." The room went quiet for 9 seconds. Marcus counted them. "We'll allow time for review," Philip said. Marcus stood. He took nothing from the table. He had brought one folder, and it had served its purpose. He buttoned his jacket. He shook Philip's hand. He walked toward the door. He stopped at the threshold. He turned. He looked at Dr. Brennan Cole directly. Not loudly, not for the room, for one person in it. "You submitted that memo to a board that answers to me," Marcus said. He walked out. He did not look back. It didn't unravel in a single week. Without the legal framework Cole had been counting on, the restructured board position, the appraisal as leverage, the divorce filing as the mechanism to reach the property, the plan compressed under its own weight almost immediately. Denise's attorney withdrew the equity interest claim within 11 days of the settlement meeting, citing the ownership documentation that had been placed into the formal record. The filing was amended. The assets held under Callaway Medical Properties were removed from the contested list. Dr. Brennan Cole's memorandum to the administrative board coordinator was reviewed, formally, by 2 board members serving in advisory capacity to the holding company. The memo was removed from consideration. Cole's admitting privileges at Meridian Regional were placed under administrative review the following month, triggered not by Marcus's direct instruction, but through the standard process that applied when the board determined a credentialed physician had submitted a formal document recommending the removal of a staff member using information obtained through unauthorized channels. Cole's attorney placed 2 calls to Philip Arroyo's office in March. Neither was returned the same day. Marcus was building something. He was not in a hurry. He had never been in a hurry when a project required sequencing. His name appeared on a management services contract in April, an agreement with a regional healthcare network to take on operational oversight of 2 additional facilities under the Callaway Medical Properties umbrella. His name appeared there not as director of operations, but as principal and majority holder. He began transitioning the day-to-day operations role to Raymond Church, who had been performing the work for 11 years without the title. Marcus gave him the title. He gave him a salary that matched it. "It was always yours," Marcus told him on the morning Raymond's new office nameplate went up. The paperwork just took a while to catch up. Raymond looked at the plate for a moment. He nodded. He went back to his inspection rounds. By the following October, Marcus had 14 people reporting directly to the holdings office, a 15th starting before the end of the year. He returned every message the same afternoon. He gave timelines and he met them. He still drove the Silverado. The dent was still in the rear panel. The second facility, an outpatient surgical center in the neighboring county, broke ground in November. Marcus drove to the site on a Tuesday morning and walked the cleared foundation with the structural contractor. He put his boot against the grade at the corner where the load-bearing walls would begin. He checked the soil compaction report himself. The contractor waited without comment. Marcus did it the same way he did everything, without hurry, without performance, to his own standard. 14 months after the settlement conference, the original Meridian building completed its Phase 2 renovation, a project Marcus's father had planned 20 years earlier and set aside for the right financing window. Marcus had kept the original architectural drawings in a filing cabinet in his second-floor office for the entirety of his tenure, waiting for the operational calendar to align. On the day the renovation certificate was filed with the county, he had the drawings framed, with his father's handwritten notes still visible in the margins, and hung in the lobby of the administrative wing. 3 feet wide, level on the wall. His name beside his father's on the ownership record at the bottom. He walked past it every morning on his circuit of the building. On a November evening, Marcus sat in his truck in the hospital's east lot after the last staff had gone home. The building was lit the way it was always lit, after hours. Essential lighting only. The floors cycling through their maintenance checks. The systems he had overseen for 19 years running quietly behind the walls, without announcement or acknowledgement. He finished the last of the coffee from the matte black thermos. He looked at the building for a moment. He got out. He walked the front entrance the way he did most evenings. Checked the lobby. Checked the main corridor. Nothing out of place, nothing that needed his attention tonight. He turned out the light in his second-floor office. He locked the door. He went to his truck and drove home through streets he had driven for 19 years. The building stood behind him, lit from inside, carrying its own weight. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've got 2 more picked out that I think you'll really enjoy.